Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be the best wildcard team for Gameweek 31. I activated the chip yesterday, but before the deadline, so it was for Gameweek 30, and already we've got a few injury concerns going into the next deadline, and I'll discuss them as we go along, building the best wildcard squad with the top players in each position, talking about the bench boost potentially in Gameweek 32 and 33, and also navigating blank Gameweek 34, and some of these great assets for those specific game weeks might struggle a little bit between game weeks 35 to 37, as some top teams and assets like Arsenal, Bournemouth, etc. will have some relatively tough fixtures. So it's a bit of a balancing act, and you're not going to be able to navigate every single game week perfectly. And I think the more chips you got, the better, but it also could cause some issues in terms of when you should deploy every single chip. I'd encourage you to check out my chip strategy guide because I delve into all the details about the best time to use every single one and to have them kind of operate in specific game weeks so they don't clash with each other. So be sure to check that out and all my FPL content. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy, which will return this weekend as we've got another deadline next Tuesday. I'll be there with another stream, and the same goes for all the videos you need for the best Limitless and Wildcard squads, as well as my team selection. The same applies for FPL, and there will be a Transfer Tips podcast headed your way. Check all the social media platforms, the links are in the description. But without further ado, let's jump straight into it. The points and rank you see on the left-hand side are after the Tuesday matches. I've only had 2 players actually feature, and already an injury to Gabriel Timber. He sustained a hamstring problem against Fulham in that 2-1 victory, coming off after just 15 minutes, and he is a major doubt to face Real Madrid in the Champions League quarterfinals. The same goes for Gameweek 31. I would be shocked if he played against Everton. I think he'll be out for several weeks. Let's wait and see what the scans say, and also what the updates are from Arsenal and reliable sources, but I think he's going to be out for several weeks at the very least, and that could potentially be a sell. I'll discuss him in more detail in the transfer tips, and hopefully by then we get a more definitive update. Even Gabriel Timber was subbed off after 75 minutes. He had an injury quite early on in the first half, but continuing on, but it did seem a bit kind of awkward the way he was running, and he had an issue with his knee. Ben White as well is another problem for Arsenal, so they are down to the bare bones in the defence. Calafuri sustained a problem during the international break, and of course the likes of Tomiyasu are out for the rest of the season anyway, so Arsenal might be a little bit less appealing defensively. So if you want to avoid that sort of double up, then you can definitely do that, and it also depends on your chip strategy when you're looking to bench boost, and my advice would be to do it in Gameweek 32 or 33. But for those with the free hit chip intact, I think you have a bit more choice and you could play in 33. Without it though, it's very awkward to navigate double Gameweek 33 and then blank Gameweek 34 if you choose to bench boost in double Gameweek 33. In my opinion, it does make it very awkward because a lot of those teams that double in 33 will blank in 34. So it's a very weird balancing act, and it does require a few hits potentially in the process, unless you've got a lot of free transfers at your disposal. Let's start with the 2 goalkeepers. I think there are other goalkeepers to consider, of course, and I'll be covering them as well, but I would go for this goalkeeper pairing if you're looking to bench boost in Gameweek 32. Arsenal had their clean sheet wiped out in the 94th minute, and there were some kind of worrying signs beforehand. Rodrigo Muniz missed a clear-cut chance only a few minutes before, and I think Arsenal deserved to concede a goal in the end. They were quite shaky defensively, especially after Gabriel was subbed off. Those that had Gabriel Timber would have banked in a clean sheet and a bonus point, so of course that's a very good return, but there are some potential issues going into future game weeks. I think David Raya might just be the best way of covering Arsenal defensively from now until the end of the season. And one of my kind of reasonings for not going for Gabriel Timber in general is because Ben White was back in the squad over the last couple of weeks, and it looks like he could maybe take some minutes from Gabriel Timber in the Premier League, and Arsenal could rotate and give a bit of breathing room so they can prevent these injuries from happening. But Ben White disappeared from the Arsenal squad going into the match day, and that of course caused some major concerns from the get-go. And now with Gabriel Timber potentially missing the Everton game, and I think I'd be more confident about him featuring than Gabriel, of course, but it's still going to be a concern. I think David Raya is just the safest bet, and the likes of Saliba would be next in line. You might also want to consider Kivior, who could step in whilst Gabriel is out for potentially a couple of weeks, but I think that will be a transfer waiting to happen, and the likes of Raya and Saliba could be season-long keeps until Gameweek 38, or at least Gameweek 35, when Arsenal start to have some tougher fixtures like Bournemouth, Liverpool and Newcastle back-to-back. But I think Raya is a solid choice. You could also go for sales, and in terms of having a goalkeeper pairing that is very expensive, for example Raya and Martinez, you could consider that sort of thing, but I'm just not that bullish on that Aston Villa defence, and even their potential double in Gameweek 33 would include Man City and Newcastle, and I think Aston Villa will rotate quite heavily. I know Martinez should play, so that's the kind of main appeal about going for him instead of Luca Dean, for example, but I'm just not really on board with that Aston Villa defence. And that's why, if you're looking to bench boost in Gameweek 32, I would recommend a backup goalkeeper like Verbruggen, who would face Leicester at home in that specific game week, and Brighton have good fixtures until Game Week 37. I think some of them are pretty decent and a few clean sheets could be kept. They have been showing some really good form recently. They narrowly lost on penalties against Nottingham Forest in the FA Cup quarter-finals. They held Man City to a 2-2 draw, and before that they won 7 consecutive games across all competitions. It was a great response after their heavy defeat against Nottingham Forest only last month. But I do like this goalkeeper pairing. If you are looking to bench boost in Game Week 33 though, I'd highly recommend Areola, because in that specific game week he would face Southampton, and that's a great chance for a clean sheet despite West Ham's problems all season. So if you don't want to go for Raya and maybe go for Saliba instead to cover Arsenal defensively, you could choose Matt Sells as your main goalkeeper. He has kept 13 clean sheets in this Premier League season, and despite Einer's injury, and he was subbed off before half-time, I still think Nottingham Forest have enough to churn out clean sheets and get these 1-0 victories and even goalless draws to remain in a very good position in the Premier League table. Otherwise, for your backup goalkeeper, it's between Verbruggen and Areola. A lot depends on your free hit. Do you have it or not? And also when you're looking to bench boost, Jose Sa would be another decent option who features in blank Game Week 34 against Leicester City. But you've also got some decent alternatives in that Wolves defence like Agbadu and Ait Nouri. Don't get me wrong, I'm certainly less keen on doubling up on Arsenal defensively now than I would have been before Gabriel's injury, but I still think it's a viable option for double Game Week 33, where in my opinion the Gunners have the best double Game Week on paper. They will face Ipswich Town and potentially Crystal Palace. They would blank in Game Week 34, and that's where the free hit could be very useful in terms of navigating that specific blank game week. But if you do not have the free hit chip available, you might want to tweak a few things in this wildcard squad, and Saliba would be one of them, and Ait Nouri would be a nice replacement. You save a lot of money in the process, and you've got that Leicester at home fixture to really tackle, and you've got that very good option. I think a lot of free hitters, for example, would have a Wolves defender or Jose Sa in goal and potentially opt for 2 or 3 Wolves players overall. That would include Mateus Cunha up front, who'll be back from suspension by that stage of the season. But otherwise, if you just really want to navigate double Game Week 33 and you can free hit in the following game week, then Saliba is still a very good option, albeit not as appealing as he would have been only a couple of days ago. Next up, I'm going to go for Daniel Munoz, who blanks in 34, but has back-to-back double game weeks. It looks like that's going to be the case in 32 and 33. The one, of course, in 32 is locked in, and they've got some decent fixtures overall. I think from a defensive perspective, you might not expect many clean sheets, but Crystal Palace have set an all-time record in English football with 6 consecutive clean sheets on their travels. They could make it 7 against Southampton tonight. And it's worth highlighting that this is across all competitions, not in the Premier League only. But for the next 3 game weeks, I think Daniel Munoz is the best defender in FPL. And from Game Week 34 onwards, he does become disposable. The same goes for a lot of Crystal Palace assets, so you might want to trim it down from a double or triple up to maybe just 1 or maybe none at all. But that is obviously something to talk about in future game weeks. I still would highly recommend having that Crystal Palace coverage for the next couple of matches. I'm also going to go for Gavardio, who is going to be that kind of Gabriel replacement, you could say. And in my wildcard squad, I had both of them in my setup. But Gavardio is now probably the most appealing premium defender, I would dare say. He has that attacking threat on the left-hand side, and even at centre-back, he can still offer some threat because he likes to bomb forward and he can score from set pieces and even from open play. The assist threat hasn't really been there. I think he might be due an assist with the underlying stats he has for the key passes, big chance created, and the expected assist figures, but I just think he offers that goal threat, which no other Man City defender will really give you. And with the standout premium defenders like Trent Alexander-Arnold and potentially Gabriel out for several weeks, I think Gavardio stands out as a great replacement for them, and he's got that high ceiling. He ended the last campaign very strongly, and I wouldn't be surprised if he did the same in this season as well. I'm also going to go for some cheaper defenders here because I'd be a bit careful about investing too much money in this defensive line. You also want enough budget to go for the midfielders and forwards that you really want, but I think Livramento is worth it. I know Trippier has a bit of a higher ceiling, but he hasn't really shown it this season, and his injury record is also quite concerning over the last year. So I think Livramento is probably a bit of a safer pick, and it also saves you a lot of money. But if funds are no issue, I certainly wouldn't mind going for that sort of Trippier pick. And Dan Burn is another solid choice, but he is on 9 yellow cards, so that is a bit of a suspension risk, and you have to go the next 2 or 3 Premier League games without a booking to avoid that 2-game suspension. So Livramento is just kind of a safe bet there in that Newcastle defence. Nick Pope in goal is another decent shout, but I'd rather cover Newcastle defensively with Tino Livramento. And last but not least, there's going to be another kind of cheap defender here, and it does depend on your strategy in terms of, are you free hitting in blank Gameweek 34? Are you also looking to use the bench boost in 32 or 33? But irrespective of all your chip strategies, I would still recommend a Nottingham Forest defender or Sells in goal, and that's why Milenkovic does make it into this squad, even if Aina does miss out for the next couple of matches, and all the updates will be provided on this channel on Aina, Gabriel Timber, and all the other injury concerns we've got. That includes Justin Kluivert and potentially Cole Palmer, who are currently yellow flagged at the time of this recording. So I think in terms of the players to tweak, depending on when you bench boost or not, Saliba would be one of them, and you could move him to Ait Nouri if you don't have the free hit to use in blank Gameweek 34, and you might want to go for a West Ham defender or Areola in goal for a potential Gameweek 33 bench boost. Even Konate could help you facing the likes of Leicester away from home in Gameweek 33, and some good fixtures all round, in my opinion, for Liverpool defensively. So your chip strategy will be very important in determining your wildcard squad. Let me know what you're looking to do with the bench boost and the other chips. Which ones do you actually have available? And all your questions will be covered and answered in the next couple of streams as well. But that is the defensive line for this Gameweek 31 wildcard squad, and I'd encourage you to leave any other suggestions down the comment section below. Bukayo Saka scored as a substitute against Fulham, and it turned out to be the winning goal after missing the last 101 days worth of action. He has been a massive miss for Arsenal, and he completely transforms that attacking line. The Gunners put in a decent second half performance, and I think Saka just elevated them to another level when he came on, and he was a bit rusty, of course, that is to be expected, but he still scored that winning goal. He was there when it mattered. It was a brilliant assist by Martinelli, and Merino scored once again up front. He would be the other one I'd consider in the Arsenal attack, but I think Saka stands out as the best option by some distance, and if you can afford having Saka and Palmer at the same time, I would highly recommend it, but not at the expense of Mohamed Salah. Ideally, you'd have all three of them, but it would require some downgrades elsewhere. If you have the budget to make that happen, I think that is a great way to distinguish yourself from other wildcard teams. So Saka does make it at the expense of Cole Palmer in this case, and Mohamed Salah does make it once again. I just wouldn't go without him, despite the lack of doubles for Liverpool. They do face Leicester in Gameweek 33, so I think that kind of matches most double game weekers in my opinion, and Salah has been by far the best FPL asset this season, so having these two is definitely something I'd advise. And Cole Palmer over the next two game weeks is arguably better than Saka, but you don't want to book in too many transfers, especially if you don't have the free hit available to navigate blank Gameweek 34 as well. But not much more needs to be said about Salah, and the kind of usual suspects like Mbeumo and Bruno Fernandes won't make it into this wildcard squad, and even Jared Bowen. But if you are looking to bench boost in 33, once again, I'd highly recommend having one or two West Ham assets to tackle that Southampton fixture. So that chip strategy once again comes into play and is very important in determining this wildcard squad. But I'm going to go for the doubtful Justin Kluivert. He has some issues after the FA Cup match. That's what Areola said, and I relayed this information in my deadline stream, but I'd still be very confident he'll make it for Gameweek 31. However, if we get a negative update about him after Gameweek 30, then this will change entirely, and you might want to go for Morgan Rogers or someone else who doubles in 33. Even those kind of single Gameweek options like Matoma, for example, could be very useful in a Gameweek 32 bench boost. And at the moment, I've got Kluivert planned on my bench because he is still part of my 15-man squad, and he'd be very appealing against Fulham at home, despite the fact it's only a single game week and Fulham are a decent side in the grand scheme of things. But at his price and below, apart from Ismaila Sarr and Jacob Murphy, I don't see many midfielders really surpassing Justin Kluivert at this moment in time. And if you've got the budget, you might want to go for Eze instead, but I'm opting for Ismaila Sarr, who is significantly cheaper at 5.7 million and is showing real consistency in recent weeks. Hopefully he continues that against Southampton tonight, and I do think having a double or triple up in Palace is highly advisable, despite the quality of fixtures not being the greatest in the grand scheme of things, but the quantity and their recent form definitely combines very well, and that's why I'd recommend that Crystal Palace midfielder. You might even want to go for both of them at the same time, Sarr and Eze, and not going for Mateta up front. I think having a triple up in Crystal Palace offensively is a decent idea, but it might be overkill, and having that defensive coverage in Munoz, who has that goal and assist for it regardless, and then going for a midfielder and Mateta up front, that is my kind of favourite balance in Crystal Palace. But of course, that is team dependent, and maybe you've got a different kind of viewpoint on that particular matter. But the last midfielder I'm going for is Jacob Murphy. If you have the extra funds, I would probably recommend Anthony Gordon instead. Does he offer better value than Jacob Murphy? Probably not, but he is more consistent, and I think Gordon has that kind of ability to get an assist or a goal in any given match, and he had that really good purple streak or purple patch earlier this season where he was getting returns on such a consistent basis. Jacob Murphy, though, does have a very high ceiling, and he got 13 points the last time he played Leicester. That is his Game Week 31 opponent, and the likes of Gordon has returned against Leicester, Man United and Crystal Palace. His next 3 opponents, of course, which covers double Game Week 32 as well, but the returns were obviously less substantial than what Jacob Murphy offered against Leicester alone. I think both of them are good options. You might even want to consider a double up in that Newcastle midfield, but I certainly wouldn't do that at the expense of Alexander Isak up front. Unsurprisingly, Isak does make it into yet another wildcard squad. He might be the most featured striker across all of these videos, but there is a good reason for that. And in Game Week 31 and double Game Week 32, he is my favourite captaincy option across both game weeks. Then he faces Aston Villa away in Game Week 33, but for blank Game Week 34, he has a plum fixture against Ipswich Town at home. Then he is somewhat disposable, you could say, but I think Isak is fixture-proof, and I wouldn't mind keeping him until the end of the season, but I certainly get the temptation to use him as a cash cow in Game Week 33 and use those extra funds to upgrade other positions like the midfield. But at this moment in time, I wouldn't go without Isak for the next couple of game weeks. He's a template pick, and of course, you can go against the template in certain ways, but having Isak is still highly recommended to get the best scores possible for all these blanks and doubles coming up. Marmoush is also another top striker, and with Erling Haaland injured for the next 5 to 7 weeks, Marmoush is a great option, and his appeal has certainly blown through the roof right now, and he has that very high ceiling. He scored a hat-trick against Newcastle, and in blank Game Week 29, he got a goal and an assist by winning a penalty against Brighton. In the FA Cup, he scored the winning goal against Bournemouth as a substitute, so he is fixture-proof, he has the high ceiling, he offers tremendous value at 7.5 million, and I think that's only going to increase over the next couple of weeks. For double Game Week 33, he might even be the best captaincy option alongside Bukayo Saka. But the last striker is Jean-Philippe Mateta. As I mentioned before, you could go for Eze and Sarr in the midfield with Daniel Munoz, and that would mean going for a different forward than Jean-Philippe Mateta. Perhaps you want to go for a budget striker like Joao Pedro, who could work very well over the next couple of game weeks despite the lack of doubles there for Brighton, but he has some very appealing single game week fixtures like Leicester at home in Game Week 32. And we can't forget about blank Game Week 34, especially if you don't have the free hit. But going from Mateta to Cunha in that blank game week will be a great transfer, but I wouldn't make it beforehand because Mateta will likely have back-to-back double game weeks in 32 and 33 with that Arsenal fixture being placed into 33. But I think Mateta could be benched at the Emirates there, and we could see Nketiah start with the FA Cup semi-final only taking place a couple of days afterwards. So Crystal Palace could rotate a little bit, and for those with the assistant manager chip, Oliver Glasner would obviously be very appealing with the table bonus opportunities, and there is no risk of rotation with a manager. The same can't be said for these players, even Mateta, as nailed on as he has been throughout the entire season. But that's something worth bearing in mind. I still think he's one of the best forwards in Fantasy Premier League, but moving him to Matheus Cunha in blank Game Week 34 is a great move. It's important to visualise future game weeks and also how the lineup would be. So David Raya is between the sticks against Everton away with a back three of Munoz, Livramento and Gvardiol. And I've gone for Saliba on the bench, but you might want to double up on Arsenal defensively against Everton away. It typically is a bit of a bogey ground going to Goodison Park, and that's the final time Arsenal will go there. And I don't think many Arsenal fans will be looking forward to that. With the midfield, Jacob Murphy, Kluivert, Salah and Saka forms a very strong midfield. Marmoush, Mateta and Isak is a template front three, but I still think the effective ownership will be maybe lower than you'd expect in the grand scheme of things when you also look at those that aren't really engaged in the X community or on YouTube. On the bench, I've got Verbruggen, Sarr, Saliba and Milenkovic, and I think that's even bench boostable this week, but you can't play 2 chips at the same time, so that wouldn't be possible if you wildcard this week. I've got roughly 0.8 million in the bank, and the expected points is 52.9, but I think some of these figures will be updated as certain players had 0 very recently in terms of expected points because they were just coming off the back of an injury, and Justin Kluivert is currently flagged, which does play a part in that kind of low figure as well. Now for double Game Week 32, the expected points is much higher. It goes up to 100.1 because you could have this feasible 50-man squad with Raya and Verbruggen as your goalkeepers with home fixtures against Brentford and Leicester respectively. You've got Munoz, Sarr and Mateta facing Man City and Newcastle away. The likes of Livramento, Murphy and Isak with 2 home fixtures against Man United and Crystal Palace. And you've got Salah at home to West Ham, Saka at home to Brentford. The same goes for Saliba, Milenkovic facing Everton at home, Kluivert facing Fulham at home, and also Gvardiol and Marmoush with another home fixture against Crystal Palace. So in my opinion, the bench boost in 32 has such a high ceiling, and this wildcard squad I've showed you does really prioritise that Gameweek 32 bench boost. But if you decide to do it in Gameweek 33 instead, then instead of going for certain players like Saliba, you might want to go for someone like Wan-Bissaka or go for Areola instead of Verbruggen. I wouldn't recommend having 3 West Ham players, but having 1 or 2 might be the sweet spot, and that includes Jarrod Bowen in the midfield, potentially at the expense of Justin Kluivert, especially if you want to get rid of that yellow flag and have a full 50-man squad with no issues there whatsoever. So there are different ways of tackling all the blanks and doubles coming up, and you still have a decent platform from Gameweek 35 until the end of the season. And if you want a full 11 in Gameweek 34 without using the free hit, then doing something like Saliba to Aït-Nouri does slightly downgrade your Gameweek 32 bench boost if you are going in that direction, but you've still got a solid player in terms of the goals and assist potential for a defender, the decent clean sheet odds, I think, with the good fixtures coming up, and also a very plum fixture in Gameweek 34 against Leicester at home. And you can go for Aït-Nouri and buy players like Robinson, who has a decent end to the season when you look at the fixtures, and you can have this sort of 11, buy Matheus Cunha up front, Verbruggen at home to West Ham, Milenkovic, Livramento, Aït-Nouri, all of home fixtures and of decent quality, especially in the case of Livramento and Aït-Nouri. Robinson faces Southampton away if you choose to bring him in, and Fulham have a decent end to the season in terms of fixtures. Kluivert, Murphy, Salah and Palmer is a strong midfield, and you would bring in Palmer for Bukayo Saka, and Matheus Cunha comes in for Jean-Philippe Mateta. Isak could be the captain, but if not, I think Salah at home to Tottenham is a great choice. And you've got a bench full of players who are very useful for the last 3 gameweeks of the season, but at the same time they blank in Gameweek 34, but this 11 should do the job for you, and you've got a lot of money in the bank to make other upgrades if needed. So if you have even more transfers at your disposal compared to me, since I've only got 1 at this moment in time, you could easily get to 4 or 5 free transfers and get even more upgrades and navigate these doubles and blanks in a better way. So it all depends on the amount of transfers you've got available, your chip strategy, when you're looking to bench boost, and I think that ultimately determines what you should wildcard to. And in terms of the timing of this chip, I think Gameweek 31 is a great time to do it. I used it yesterday before the Gameweek 30 deadline, and my initial plan was to actually go into Gameweek 31 and roll with a decent Gameweek 30 squad, but with all the injuries that popped up and also a weak bench, I decided to play the chip 1 week earlier, and the international break has certainly changed things a lot with the FA Cup matches and also all the injuries and issues that have been popping up. But I think those that are wildcarding in Gameweek 31 might gain an advantage, especially with the likes of Gabriel, for example. A lot of Gameweek 30 wildcards will have him in their setup, so that's where timing can be very crucial in Fantasy Premier League. You might even want to save this chip for later in the season and just make some of these transfers, bringing in the players I've recommended on this wildcard as part of free transfers, and play the chips in a different sort of way. But no matter what you do, I'd highly recommend you check out my chip strategy guide, because that will be very useful in breaking down all the chips and the best time to use every single one of them. That wraps up another best wildcard team video for the season, this time out of Gameweek 31. You can see some injury updates, which I talked about in my deadline stream on screen. So Erling Haaland, of course, sustained an injury to his ankle, and he will be out for the next 5 to 7 weeks, which was confirmed by Pep Guardiola in a press conference yesterday. And another injury up that we got was about Justin Kluivert. He felt some issues, and let's see if he does feature against Ipswich Town. But if he doesn't, I still don't think that means he's out for Gameweek 31 definitively. But maybe Areola has further updates to provide in the press conference tonight. That'd obviously be very helpful, and you might want to look elsewhere in terms of players at that price and below. The likes of Sarr and Murphy will be standouts, but if you've got them in your squad already, then you might want to consider the likes of Matoma as single Gameweek options, or Jarrod Bowen if you can stretch to him and you're looking to bench boost in Gameweek 33. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it insightful, then like this video, subscribe to the channel, and also hit the notification bell so you don't miss a single upload or live stream for both FPL and UCL Fantasy. Follow me on X, Instagram and Blue Sky, DylanRCM, and check all the links in the description below for my Patreon and the Championships, for early access to my videos, amongst many other perks. The Discord server, FPL League and Spotify can also be found in the description. I'll see you very soon for more FPL and UCL Fantasy content. The Champions League is returning next week, and that means more videos on live streams are headed your way.